This is a Punisher story that begins and ends with Frank Castle, but does not feature Frank Castle. Instead, the star of the show is this guy right here, Joe Garrison, the gravedigger of S.H.I.E.L.D., former Black Ops S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, former Family Man, former Punisher. Joe here was developed by Marvel to replace Frank Castle after the controversy around him and his iconography became a little too much for them to handle. So Frank was sent off to another dimension and the Punisher mantle was retired for a little bit. Or at least, Frank's Punisher mantle was. See, Marvel is still a business, and they were not going to lose one of their most popular brands to a small bit of controversy. It is under these circumstances that Marvel commissioned writer David Pepose and artist Dave Watcher to create a new Punisher who is disconnected from Frank Castle's baggage. Something the creators would openly admit was a core part of the design philosophy with this new version of the Punisher, with David Pepose saying that the core idea was John Wick meets The Fugitive. This new version of the Punisher went from a veteran whose family was killed in a mob war to an ex-Black Ops S.H.I.E.L.D. agent whose family was killed by an international conspiracy. Microchip's role in the Punisher's world as his technician and information dealer went to Joe's old S.H.I.E.L.D. handler AAA, and Jigsaw is no longer a mob boss with a disfigured face and a grudge against Frank Castle, but rather is now an international terrorist cell who sows as much chaos and destruction as possible in the name of profit. And most of this comic works. Joe being just a guy who has only AAA, his tools, and his skills to rely on as he goes up against an unstoppable force with endless resources and even a few D and E list supervillains at their disposal. 95% of this comic works. The 5% that doesn't work is when it tries to insist it's a Punisher comic. Joe and this comic being called The Punisher actually works against them as a concept, because everything else here is really solid, but every mention of the word Punisher just reminds the reader that this is all an overcorrection that Marvel took too far, and soon decided wasn't necessary. Joe's tenure as the Punisher would last all of 4 issues and a Daredevil miniseries. Marvel, or more accurately Disney, decided they didn't particularly care about the controversy and decided to take a neutral stance on the matter, especially after Frank Castle was featured in both Marvel Rivals and Daredevil Born Again. Thus, Frank Castle was brought back in September of 2025, and Joe Garrison was deemed irrelevant and unnecessary. Joe's first and only series ends with him bringing down Jigsaw and riding off into the night, the world believing him dead and his future in the Marvel Universe unknown. Joe was not here for a long time, and he was the product of an awkward situation, but he was here regardless, and he made the best of it, and he avenged his family in the process.